Yo, what's up, y'all? The Oprah voting is over. The voting part is over. I'm still waiting for my Oprah phone call. Might come today, might come tomorrow, might not even come at all, but it's all good because we made a statement with 816,000 votes in a matter of 1 week. We ended up number 31 in the whole contest. So again, thank you, and we'll just kind of hang out and see what happens with that. If you missed last night's radio show, click right down there and download it and listen to it. It's going to blow your hair back. Seriously, it is in probably the top 3 interviews I've done in the last 2 years. It's up there with like Paul Chek and Mark Sisson and Kevin Gianni, which I thought was the bomb interview right there. Great interview. Dr. Thomas O'Brien was on. We talked all about gluten sensitivity, celiac disease, gluten intolerance. One of those things that is just tremendously underdiagnosed these days. People don't know how to diagnose it. They don't know how to identify it. And so it's a major problem that people don't really know that they have. We haven't talked much about celiac disease here. Basically, the classic definition of celiac, and we'll talk about the other things in a second that aren't so classic, is gluten comes from wheat, barley, rye. It comes from some grains, not all grains, but from some grains. Gluten gets down into your intestines, through your digestive tract, and in your small intestines, you got these finger-like projections, and they're called villi. And those villi help you to absorb your nutrients. And if these finger-like projections had little hairs all over them, those hairs are called microvilli. And they make enzymes like lactase that helps you to break down milk sugar, lactose. Sucrase that helps you break down table sugar, sucrose. They also have enzymes that break down amino acids. So they're very important for you taking in and absorbing your nutrition. But when the gut becomes exposed to gluten, it recognizes it as toxic, as inflammatory. And what happens is those microvilli start to get worn down. And so now you're noticing, all of a sudden I'm lactose intolerant. I wasn't always lactose intolerant. That's a sign right there. You've got something going on in your gut. May not be celiac, but there's something going on in your gut that's blunting those hairs there. Then what happens is your villi start to atrophy. They start to get worn down. And so now you've got a gut that kind of looks like this. It's all shriveled and those structures are just, going away. So what do you think happens to your absorption? You're not going to be absorbing your nutrients properly. You're going to have nutritional deficiencies, mineral deficiencies, all of these issues going on, inflammation going on in the gut, and this has many other consequences within the rest of the body. And so that's celiac. But the thing that I didn't know prior to the last few days is that for every one person who has celiac and has intestinal problems, there are 8 who have no intestinal issues, period. Completely asymptomatic in the gut. They've got other issues going on around their body. So some of the things we talked about last night were autoimmune issues, thyroid issues. We talked about epilepsy, psoriasis, heart disease, diabetes, all of these different ways in which celiac can impact your health. The one that really stood out though, because we've talked about this a few times on the channel, is depression. We talked about lack of protein can be a depression issue. We talked about neurotransmitters, but we haven't quite talked about how celiac can affect the mood. And so check this out. You guys know you need to get blood flow in your brain. You need to get blood flow in your body. So let's say, for example, your foot falls asleep because of lack of blood flow. And you try to get up and walk around, you have a hard time walking for a minute there, right? You kind of got to move around and clench your toes a bit to get the blood flowing again, and then it functions properly. But what if not enough blood flow is going to the brain? And so how does your brain get blood in the first place? You got these things called carotid arteries in the sides of your neck. And so those supply the blood to the brain. And so if you watch, for example, if you watched the Brock Lesnar fight the other day, he had that dude in a chokehold, and he had his arm right over his carotid artery, right? And so that reduced the blood flow to his opponent's brain, and the guy was about to pass out, and so he tapped out. So you need blood in there. Now, there's a test. It's called a SPECT study, and it shows where that blood is going to. Is the blood saturating all of the 12 parts of the brain? So he did a study with 15 people who had celiac. and they were completely untreated. They weren't on their gluten-free diet. They took another 15 who had celiac but were on their gluten-free diet for a full year. And then they took 24 controls. These are folks who didn't have celiac, had no problem with wheat at all, no problems with gluten at all. And so they did this spec study to see, hey, are all of the areas of their brain getting blood flow? And what they found was very interesting. Actually, it was extremely interesting. Of those who had celiac, who were untreated, who were not on their gluten-free diet, 73% showed lack of blood flow to about 1/3 of their brains. 1/3 of their brains were getting lack of blood flow. That's a trip. Of the 15 who had celiac, who were on the right diet, who were on the gluten-free diet, only one had lack of blood flow. So that's a big difference, 73% versus only one person, okay? And then of the 24 controls, none of them had any problem with blood flow. All 12 areas of the brain were getting blood flow. So let's go back to that 73% of those who weren't getting blood flow to a full third of their brain. These were folks who were celiacs. These were folks who weren't on the gluten-free diet. And of these folks, all of them, every single one of them had lack of blood flow to their frontal lobe. Now, if you've got lack of blood flow to your frontal lobe, you're going to have depression. You're going to have anxiety. And so we have to think about all the people out there who have depression and anxiety who are using medications. And they'll be on a medication for a while. It might work for a minute, and then it stops working. Then they have to switch. And that one works for a little while, and they have to switch to another one because it stops working. How many of those folks just have celiac disease? How many just have problems with gluten? These folks need to get checked because your depression and your anxiety might just be hanging out on your plate. You might be eating it every day and it's shutting down blood flow to the very important parts of your brain. So that's our little nugget for today, our 7-minute nugget today. We also have to think about memory issues, which a lot of people have, brain fog issues, behavior issues, epilepsy issues. All of these go hand in hand with blood flow to the brain. And so find out more about testing by listening to the radio show. Again, it's right down there. Click on that link. It's also on iTunes. And tune in tomorrow because we're going to talk about something else. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but we'll talk about something else. So I'll see you guys later. Peace.